Good evening and welcome to the public meeting of the Halton District School Board for Wednesday, March 25th, 2020. As everyone knows, we are in strange times and therefore have had to resort to moving our meetings from the J.W. Singleton Center to a completely remote teleconferencing setting. I would like to thank everyone for their patience in this process. Normally, our board meetings are very visual. For the public that have joined the teleconference to listen to the meeting, your line is muted. This is not out of the ordinary for our board meetings, as our agenda does not allow for public questions and comments during our meetings. If you do have questions, please reach out to your local trustee or myself after the meeting. During this teleconference, trustees have the ability to vote digitally and can add themselves to a digital speakers list to try to keep sound clarity on the telephone line. Trustees will keep their phone muted when they do not have the floor. Please note that trustees are able to interrupt the meeting with a point of order if they have a procedural issue or a point of privilege if trustees can't hear or if they are having technical difficulties. And this meeting is being voice recorded. For anyone new that has joined the meeting, I hear some beeps going, so if those are our student trustees, please hit *6 so that you can unmute your line and then you can use your regular mute on your keypad on your phone. So at this time, I'm going to take roll call. So please answer yes or online or whatever you like as I call your name in alphabetical order by last name. So Kelly Amos. Trustee Amos? Okay, I'll come back. Trustee Burns?
Present.
Thank you. Trustee Collard?
Present.
Thank you. Trustee Daniele?
Present.
Thank you. Vice Chair Harrison?
Hello, I'm here.
Thank you. Trustee Garretts?
I'm here.
Excellent. Trustee Gray?
Present.
Excellent. Trustee Lau? Okay. Trustee Oliver?
Present. Oh, I'm here.
Oh, spoke. Sorry.
Me. Trustee Lau, I'm here. Sorry. How do I unmute and mute?
So I would just use your phone at this point to mute. Are you? Do you know how to do that?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, great. Trustee Reynolds?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Trustee Rocha?
I'm here.
Trustee Shuttleworth?
Yeah, here I am.
I'm going to try Trustee Amos again.
Yes. Sorry,
Excellent.
my phone timed out.
That's okay. Now I'm going to go through the staff. So Trustee Miller. I mean, not Trustee Miller. What am I talking about? Director Miller.
Trustee Miller is accounted for.
Associate Director Bogue.
I'm here. Thank you.
Superintendent Blackwell.
I'm here.
Excellent. Superintendent Pachetti.
I'm here as well.
Excellent. Superintendent Etoff. Superintendent Etoff? You might still be on mute. Okay, Superintendent Hunt Gibbons. Okay, Executive Officer McFadden.
Present.
Excellent. Superintendent Newton.
I'm here, thank you.
Excellent. Superintendent Pennyfather.
Present.
Great. Superintendent Padra-Barrett. Okay, Superintendent Ruddock.
I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, it's Superintendent Salmini.
I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, Superintendent Truffin.
Good evening, everyone.
Okay, great. Superintendent Nagoy.
Present.
And Superintendent Zonnefeld.
I'm here.
Excellent. Okay. So, just moving on here. This evening, Trustee Oliver will be honoring the land. Go ahead, Trustee Oliver.
Thank you. Halton, as we know it today, is rich in history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis. From the Anishinaabe to the Arawonderon, the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we have the responsibility to honor and respect the four directions, land, waters, plants, animals, ancestors that walked before us, and all the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We would like to acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for sharing their territory with us.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of possible conflict of interest? Go ahead and say it out loud if you do. Okay, hearing none. Next, we're up to the agenda. So please note that we will be deferring the school naming vote to April 15th as the process outlined in our governance procedure is a bit too complicated for this remote setting at this time. I will be working with Vice Chair Harrison to determine a procedure that meets our requirements should the extension of facility closure continue facilities closure continue and includes April 15th. Also, as a heads up, there is a last-minute information report that will be attached to this agenda concerning Viola Desmond. The director is going to bring this report to the trustees tonight during director's report, and you'll be able to answer questions, etc. But the actual report will be appended to this particular agenda package when it's and reposted to the website. So, Trustee Amos, would you like to move a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Trustee Reynolds, would you like to second this motion? Trustee Reynolds?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Now I can. Thank you. Is there any further discussion on this agenda, amended agenda? Please use your red form to request to speak. Okay, not seeing any speakers. So the time is 7:08. All those in favor of approving the agenda as amended, please use your blue form.
Sorry, Andrea, I voted, but my name's not coming up on the list.
Okay, you were right at the top, so I can see on the list. You may have to scroll up a little bit to see it.
As it is, I got it. Thank you.
I've got 11 people so far. Who am I missing?
I can't find the form.
Is this who's speaking, Olivia?
Olivia, yeah.
Okay. I think Vice Chair Harrison, would you be able to send the form over to Trustee Lau?
Yes.
And for this motion, are you okay to approve the agenda, Trustee Lau?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And I think Trustee Burns might also be missing here.
Yes, that'd be me. Unfortunately, I also have some trouble finding the blue form that you mentioned.
Okay. So, okay, thank you very much. So that carries unanimously then. Okay. Great. Okay. So we have no Inspire Award presentations this evening and no delegations. We have no presentations this evening, and so we're up to the consent agenda items. So Trustee Gray, would you like to move a motion to deal with the consent agenda?
Yes, I would.
Thank you. Trustee Garretts, would you like to second?
Yes, I would.
Thank you. I'm going to put the motion on the floor. Be it resolved that the Halton District School Board approve the consent agenda action items and receive the information items for March 25th, 2020. Are there any items that need to be pulled for discussion? If you could just, actually what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, it's kind of an odd situation. I'm going to call each item in order as they are given in the report. And if you have something to say about or you'd like that pulled, please add yourself to the speakers list. Okay, so Trustee Amos, I see that you're on the list. Go ahead and speak right now. You may be on mute.
Yeah, I'd like to pull the capital update with financials.
Okay, so when we get down there, I'll be sure. Okay, so I'm just going to go through them. Okay, so first we'll start with the minutes. Does anybody want to speak to the minutes? Not seeing anything. The order paper. The administrative procedure update. The board report update. Okay, we're up to the capital update with financials. Go ahead, Trustee Amos.
Thank you. This question is to Superintendent Pizzetti or Director Miller, whoever. With the recent announcement of only essential services allowed to continue, how long could and how will this affect the building of Oakville Northeast number 2? Because I believe from the report it's right on track to be finished for May at this time, and as well as the other construction projects that we have going.
Through you, Chair Burns, I will start and then pass it on to Superintendent Puccetti. Through you, Chair Burns, to Trustee Amos. At this point, we do not believe that there is an impact on this work that's going on at the new school in Northeast Oakville, nor any of the other construction projects that we currently have. Although they are not essential in terms of services provided to the public, they are allowed to continue work, and the Premier mentioned about construction works specifically. However, this could change at some point, and I think we all need to be aware that those projects could be closed down if the province believes that all construction should cease as well. The other aspect is each construction company or developers also have the option to close operations during this, as has happened on some projects, not necessarily in the school sector, but in other public sector and other private sector construction projects. So at the moment, the work continues, but I will pass it on to Superintendent Puccetti for any further comments.
Thank you, Director Miller. I hope everyone can hear me okay, that I unmuted successfully. So just to say that it is an evolving landscape, but the general contractors at most of these projects are still intent on continuing work. However, some of the sub-trades have indicated that they will be staying at home, and that may delay aspects of the project, staying at home for 2 weeks, for example. And also, there is a concern that there may be some materials and delivery lead times that are delayed, but that in part has to do with more of a global slowdown for delivery of certain materials. But it's too soon to tell. And there are other things that could happen to help catch up on schedules, doubling up of forces in the summer, substituting materials. It's still very early on to what needs to be done. But at this point, the general contractors are continuing to work on those projects and make adjustments with how they do certain aspects of the work. And when we get more information, we'll certainly update everybody. And that's it. Thank you.
Trustee Amos, do you have a follow-up, or are you good?
Thank you very much. I appreciate the information. I guess we will wait and see as the next few weeks progress. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing nobody else on this particular item, we'll move to the operating financial update. Does anybody have putting their hand up for that? Seeing none. Okay, so I'm going to call the question. So all in favor of approving the consent agenda action items and receiving the information items, please use your blue form. Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we are up to ratification action items. Vice Chair Harrison, do we have any business from private session that requires approval?
Not this evening, thanks.
Okay then. Okay, so now we are up to 4.2 for action, March 25th, 2020. As per the amended agenda, we have one action item for this evening. I'd like to draw your attention to item 1 of this section, 421 school year calendar, report 20027 on page 25 of your board package. Trustee Rocha, you are the trustee representative assigned to the calendar committee. Would you like to move this item?
Yes, please.
Trustee Oliver, would you like to second?
Yes, I second.
Okay, I'm going to put the recommendation on the floor. Be it resolved that the Halton District School Board approve the summary of statutory and board designated holidays and professional activity days for 2020-2021 as recommended through consultation with the school year calendar committee. Is there any debate? Okay, Vice Chair Al Harrison, go right ahead.
Thank you very much. Through you, Madam Chair. My question isn't so much about the final outcome of the committee work, which I will be supporting. It's more about this odd environment and climate that we find ourselves in, and just wondering whether the ministry has given any direction in terms of the next calendar year, whether we know anything about that at this point in time. Thanks.
Through you, Chairs of Bench, to Vice Chair Al Harrison, I think this question is for me, and Associate Director Bogue was the one who wrote the report around the calendar, and maybe he has something to add after I speak. I don't know, but we have been given no indication around the calendar for next year from the ministry. I would say that the ministry has been rightfully consumed with the current situation, the current school year, and managing through all those the challenging and myriad of issues that there are to deal with. So I have not heard in teleconferences that I've had with the ministry any comments about next year's calendar. But I will turn it over to Associate Director Bogue to see if he has heard anything through his committee.
Through you, Madam Chair, to trustees, I have not heard anything either. So we, at this point, are still sort of planning based on the last communication from the ministry. Just one additional piece for trustees is our coterminous board. As you know, their proposed calendar is aligned with ours, and they are meeting next Tuesday as well, hopefully to deal with their calendar. That's all. Thanks.
Okay. Is that okay, Vice Chair Al Harrison? Any follow-up?
No, thank you.
Okay. Trustee Shuttleworth.
So I think Trustee L. Harrison and I are sharing the same brain tech because I had the same question. So I pass.
Okay. Thank you for communicating that. Wonderful. Okay. So seeing no other speakers on the speakers list for this, I'm going to call the question at 7:20. So all those in favor, please use the blue form. Okay, and that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, so for any members of the public that tuned in after my opening remarks, please note that the school naming vote has been deferred to April 15th. So we are now up to communications to the board. First off is item number 5.1, student trustee reports. Trustee Lau and Trustee Burns, do you have a report for us this evening?
We do, yes.
Go right ahead, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Chair Bench. Greetings and good evening, everyone. On behalf of Trustee Lau and myself, we sincerely hope you've all had a good break in spite of the uncertainty that has surfaced in the past few weeks. In truth, because of the ongoing situation regarding COVID-19 and the coronavirus, many of the regular events planned by Trustee Lau and myself have been canceled, or at the very least, put on hold. Our future student Senate meetings, for example, have been canceled to prevent a large gathering of people per the guidelines developed by Health Canada. At present, given the recent announcement that students will continue to be out of school beyond early April, Trustee Lau and I will be monitoring the situation and reacting to any updates accordingly. Should the situation continue into May, HYLS might need to be canceled as well. Regardless, we will continue to make the best choices that we can for the well-being of Halton students and their families. I'll now pass it off to Trustee Lau for other updates regarding the situation.
Thank you, Trustee Burns. Over the past few days, we've also opened up a question box on our Instagrams, and we've received approximately 75 questions from students all across the board, with over 1,000 students viewing each and every story post. So we've tried our best to respond to the best of our abilities, and we've often been citing the email that students should have received. But there still seems to be a few questions that we are unable to answer at this time and that we weren't able to address. So I have been asked to forward 5 main questions to the board tonight. Should I just do them one by one, or should I send it in an email?
Probably one by one.
Okay. Okay. One student asked, if I need to apply for SHISM at another school for next year, I'm supposed to apply in April, what should I do? What will happen to the requirements needed for SHISM?
Through you, Chair Bench, to Trustee Olivia. I will turn it over to Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons. Some of the questions that you are going to ask that are coming from students, we will not know the answers to likely, as we're all working on those answers from the province and Ontario government, but we certainly understand that Ontario government and Ministry of Education, I should say, we certainly understand the angst that many students are feeling. So I will turn that question over to Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons, but after you've done the 5 questions in public here, if you can send those 5 questions to us so we can add them to our committee meetings so we can get more complete answers if you don't get a complete one this evening. Okay?
Okay.
So,
sounds good.
Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons? You might be on mute. Director Miller? Oh, it's very quiet.
I can move on to one of the other 4.
Why don't you try that? Go right ahead.
Okay. Is there going to be a letter sent out to co-op students specifically? Someone said, I can't fulfill all of the requirements because of self-quarantine, and my teacher hasn't said anything yet.
Chair Gerbent, it's Superintendent Reddick. I can respond to that question.
That'd be excellent. Thank you.
The co-op program is going to certainly look a little different, seeing as students cannot complete the workplace placements. However, school programs is developing a plan for the other elements of the co-op coursework to be completed virtually. And co-op teachers will be in touch with their students soon to communicate those plans.
Perfect. Okay. The next one is, will students still receive midterm report cards? Or when would we know that, or if we would even know that?
Chair Gerbent, it's Colette Reddick again. Would you like me to answer that?
That would be perfect. Thank you.
Okay. That is a decision that will rest with the Ministry of Education, and at this time, there's been no decisions or no communication about reporting. So as soon as we have any information about what that may look like, we will be communicating that to staff, students, and families.
Perfect. In the email that was sent by the HTSB, to students, it stated that teachers will not be evaluating any student work for marks over these 2 weeks. A few students were asking if teachers will be able to return assignments that were handed in before the break so they know what marks they got. And are teachers allowed to assign more work over the 2 weeks that can be marked even after the 2 weeks? Please clarify. Thanks.
Through your Chair, Gerbent. Associate Director Bold, were you going to take that one?
Yeah, maybe I can start, and certainly Director Miller will weigh in here as well. And we will talk a little bit more about this, I think, a little bit later in the agenda. But for the next 2 weeks, the focus of our teachers across our system will be really on looking at how to move their current courses and classes over to an online and distance learning kind of format. So a bulk of their work will be spent doing that work so that they're ready for this, should this be a longer, and we're expecting it to be longer duration, certainly than the originally planned 2 weeks. So in the meantime, for this 2 weeks, the direction and expectations of our teachers that they provide some work for students, but
letting you know that I'm back if you're able to hear me.
But that they're not actively assessing and evaluating that work, as they are dealing with some of these other pieces as well. And certainly for any work that was handed in prior to March break and assessed, those will all be pieces that hopefully individual classes will work through those things. So if work was handed in prior and it was marked, absolutely it's going to be included, and then we'll have to sort out how that work is returned to kids. To students, particularly if we're not back until later this spring. I think that's it for my comments for now.
Okay, and then I will weigh in, Trustee Lau, and then Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons is back on the line, so she can. If you could repeat that first question again after I finish, and then she can respond to it. There is a provincial-wide assessment committee that's looking at how students will be assessed in the secondary schools primarily around credit granting courses. And the goal of the ministry is to try to be consistent from board to board to board so that we're all essentially doing the same thing. Associate Director Bold's comments are exactly correct, and we're working through this. I will let you know that I am on conference calls twice a week with the Minister of Education, and this is one of the topics around assessment, what can be returned, how we will do it. And as Associate Director Bogue said, these 2 weeks are intended to try to sort through all that and figure out how we can best support students. The stakes are high, we know, for grade 12 and grade 11 students, generally higher than many other grades simply because they're at the tail end or at the end of their school career. So stay tuned. There'll be more information coming from this. And then I'd ask you to repeat that question, and then maybe Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons can address it.
Okay, perfect. That sounds good. I'll pass that on. My first question was, one of the students asked, if I need to apply to SHISM at another school for next year, I'm supposed to apply in April, what should I do? And another student said, I'm in SHISM right now. What will happen to the requirements needed for me to get my certification?
Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons, we can't hear you.
Well, Chair Burns, she's clearly having some technical issues.
Yes,
I guess,
yes.
Trustee Lau, if you just send us the question, we will get it, and we will post the question on our FAQs that Superintendent Ruddock is dealing with around all these questions, around all the issues that are arising at the present time. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, sounds good. I can send you a longer list. I synthesized them all down to these 5. But yeah, I'll send all of them. Yeah, okay.
But for sure, send them to myself and Associate Director Bogue.
Okay, perfect. I have one last one. I'm not sure if this is under provincial jurisdiction or not, but can students graduate if they have not completed their volunteer hours because of the self-quarantine? The ministry said that they're waiving some requirements like the OSSLP and EQAO, but what about volunteer hours?
Through you, Chair Burns, to Trustee Lau, I don't have the exact answer. I can tell you where they are leaning. In our teleconferences with the province, I believe that the province will make a province-wide decision on that. And by all indications, it will be similar to the one around the literacy test, that the 40 hours will likely be waived. I don't want to say 100% at this point, but we recognize that many students will not be able to complete the 40 hours due to the circumstances they're in, the current circumstances. So the province recognizes that, and the highest levels of education in this province, Deputy Minister, they are fully aware of that challenge. So I think it's just, it's a wait and see at this point. I know for students it's a little bit nerve-wracking. They'd like to hear it straight away, but there are many considerations in their decision-making. But a decision will be made and it'll come from the Ministry of Education.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for answering all my questions to the best of your abilities. That's all we have at this time. Thank you.
What? Thank you. Chair Burns, I have questions for the 2 student trustees, though.
Yes, go ahead.
Trustee Burns and Trustee Lau, the question I have is, as you are aware, we have made a decision at the board level to cancel all trips, all field trips, all sorts of extracurricular events, and the graduation commencement and the prom, which is the biggest impact is obviously on grade 12 students in secondary schools, sometimes grade 11 as well, and younger grades, but it's primarily a secondary one. But we've canceled elementary graduations, et cetera, and so on. I do want to emphasize that this is a really difficult decision and a really unfortunate decision, but we feel it was the best decision and the most prudent decision at this time, given the circumstances we find ourselves all living in. Since making that decision, I've had, not a lot, but I've had a few emails, and I know a few principals have been contacted and some of the superintendents have been contacted, primarily around grade 12 commencement, which we anticipate will move to the fall for all our secondary schools, but for some, they would like to see it at the end of the year, and or prom. So I am going to put something together that is addressed directly to students around our explanation for that so that they understand. But why I'm asking you is I would like to run it across you two student trustees prior to it going out to all students. Is that okay?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
Sounds great to me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No more questions, Chair Burns.
Okay, I have a speakers list here. Trustee Oliver, go right ahead.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just a comment and a question. I want to thank the student trustees for joining us tonight, and it's great to hear your voices. Thank you for the update, and thank you for bringing questions from the students to us directly. Question to Director Miller. It's a clarification around the waiving of the requirement for SLT. Does that refer to grade 12 students who may have not had the opportunity to write that exam, or is it for the current grade 10s as well?
Through you, Chair Burns, to Trustee Oliver, the waiving of what the province has done as waived the requirement for the passing of the OSLLT, the literacy test. So for grade 12 students who were either unsuccessful or who have not written the literacy test, the requirement will be waived. In some cases, students were required to take Ontario literacy course, or there would be an adjudication in which they determined whether the student had met the requirements of literacy test. Those have all been waived for this year for any graduating students. The EQAO literacy test for grade 10 students is also canceled for this year, but it will be on next year, and it's expected that grade 11s and grade 10s will write the test next year. But no student will be precluded from graduating this year as a result of either failure of the literacy test, not completing the literacy test, not completing the Ontario literacy course, or a failure to have an adjudication. Thanks.
Okay, is that good, Trustee Oliver?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Trustee Collard. Trustee Collard, you may be on mute. Trustee Collard, are you there? Did you get kicked off? I feel that we may have lost Trustee Collard. So at this time, there's no other questions or comments for the student trustee report. So thank you very much for giving us this report. I know this is very, very strange times for all the students, and you know, my my heart really goes out to the students, especially those that are in transition over, you know, those grade 8s to grade 9s, and those that are moving on. It may feel like it may feel terrible. But we're all just, of course, looking out for everybody's safety. So thank you very much for your report, and take care. And as Trustee Oliver said, I'm glad you made it to join us in the meeting tonight. So Trustee Collard, just checking if you've been able to make it back on the line. No, I don't think so at this time. Okay. So we're going to move on We're up to action items for April 1st, and because sometimes we have items that meet established criteria to come to the board table twice before voting, so we have no items at this point for next week. We do, however, have an item that does need to come to the table twice, but will not be returning until June 17th, 2020. It is item 522, Special Education Plan, on page 31 in the board package. So Superintendent Zonnefeld, the microphone is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thanks. Good evening, trustees. Through the chair, before you, you have a report that you've seen for a number of years now at this time, and this is the draft of the special education plan for the following year, so for the 2020-21 school year. And what happens each year is we make sure that our special education plan reflects our programs and services that are offered to our students, and therefore we need to do a revision process each year. So this revision, this first draft of these revisions has occurred and has gone to SEAC as well for their input and approval, which happened a few meetings ago. And so what you see here is a summary of those amendments that occurred, the vast majority of which are really housekeeping, where we make changes that reflect any changes to our programs and services. We try to stay away from much wordsmithing, because sometimes we change things and then just change them back the next year. So it's fairly reflective of our programs and services, what you see there. And what happens in the spring is that some other changes sometimes occur, partly as we finalize programs and services for next year, but also through the course of the budget process. So as we work through that process, if there are going to be changes to programs and services, we make sure that the plan reflects those. And so we want trustees to be aware of what the plan looks like now, and for you to know that it was supported by SEAC. And then for any final changes, we'll bring this back to you in June if there are changes as a result of our own changes, but also changes that result through the budget process. So I'll leave it at that, and I'd certainly take any questions.
Okay, do we have any questions for Superintendent Zonnefeld about this item? Trustee Collard, go ahead, the floor is yours. We can't hear you yet.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay, I don't know what happened before because I could still hear everyone else, but no matter what I did, I couldn't get through, and I apologize. My question through you to Superintendent Zonnefeld is, what was the SEAC commentary about the changes being made? There's been general support, but as always, there is going to be some dissent, and I'm curious as to if there was any dissent to any of these changes.
There was no dissent to any of the changes. We did hold a vote. We don't do many votes at SEAC, but we did hold a vote, and all associations except for the Learning Disabilities Association of Halton Hamilton were in support. And LDAH did not, they actually abstained from voting, and did that because they said they hadn't had a chance to fully review the report, and therefore had abstained and would come back to us with any comments, which they have not. So
thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, are there any other speakers for this topic? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to the next item, and that is number 531. Suspension Expulsion Report, report number 20041 on page 35 of the board package. Superintendent Podrick, would you like to speak to this, please? Superintendent Podrick, you might be on mute. Superintendent Podrick, you can try *6. Well, we can't seem to hear Superintendent Podrick. Perhaps he's having technical difficulties. So if people will indulge me, perhaps we'll bump this item down. We'll go to the operational plan and then come back to this one. So the next item is 532, Operational Plan Update, Report 20040 on page 38 of your board package. Associate Director Bogue, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, great. Thanks. I just wanted to confirm that. Through you to trustees, this is our operational plan update for this school year for 1920. This has been a very unusual year, and we bring this report each year to trustees. This year being unusual with labor action happening throughout much of the year, and so there's been very little opportunity around professional development. However, we did want to update you on some of the successes that have been happening this year, and as you can see, there are lots of things that are still happening around learning, even though formal pull-out PD sessions and things were not really happening. We normally do a bit of a presentation, but because of the unusualness of this year, we thought a report will probably suffice. And superintendents all contributed to this report and would be happy to weigh in on any aspect that you have a question about. That's it for me. Okay. Does anybody have, I've just received a message that Superintendent Podrick is having technical difficulties. Does anybody have any questions for Associate Director Bogue? If so, please use the red form to put your hand up. Okay, seeing no questions at this time, thank you very much for bringing the report forward. I guess it's everybody feels that it covers everything it needs to. So I'm just going to put a call out for Superintendent Podrick. Are you back? No, not at this time. Okay, so we're going to go to notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion? Oh, yes, go ahead. Yes.
Might I suggest we defer the expulsion suspension report till the next board meeting in April, and Superintendent Podrick can speak to it then?
Okay, so I'm going to do a quick unanimous consent to be able to do that.
Hello. Hi, it's Superintendent Podrick here. I'm back in.
Oh, excellent. Great to hear your voice. So we're going to go to your item now, the suspension expulsion report. So just a reminder to everybody, this is the report on page 35 of your board package, report 20041. Superintendent Podrick, go right ahead.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, trustees, this is the board report following up on the motion in February around our suspension data year over year, 2018-19 compared to 2019-20. It's the first time we're bringing this report. It's reflective from September to March 1st. The next report we'll bring will be the end of the school year, although it's a bit of an anomalous year. In terms of student data numbers for the second semester, they're going to look fantastic. But if trustees have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I think the report is pretty straightforward. Okay, we have a speaker on the speakers list.
Trustee Shuttleworth, go right ahead.
Thank you. My question is, so you have a list of all the trainings put in place to sort of support students in avoiding suspensions or expulsions. What my question is that to all schools, or is there sort of a benchmark that you need to hit to receive this training?
Thank you for the question. These right now have been and historically been in place for quite a while. They're accessible to every school on the board. We would not have a program like restorative practices or CPS. It would be hard to find a school that hasn't had all of the staff trained in those areas. BMS, all our elementary teachers have had that training. Orchestrate Your Classroom is new, and it's about 500 teachers that have taken that in the last couple of years. And managing violent and aggressive behavior is something every school has done a 2-day training on, and with a lead team, and then taken that back to staff. So these are all fairly well entrenched. Now, having said that, we are looking to build a better model, even with the new multi-year plan. So some of these, while the core elements will be kept, they may be delivered or repackaged in different ways. But I would say why we listed these 5, there are others. For example, even for really small kids, HOPES would be a preventative program post-suspension or expulsion, where we hope to eat into, repetitive behaviors. But on a broad basis, these programs are all in place in all schools. But to be frank, functioning at different levels and within each school.
Thank you.
Over to you.
Over now.
Okay, so Vice Chair Al Harrison, go right ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, just following up on Trustee Shuttleworth's comment and looking forward to the next report, I was just wondering whether some additional information could be included for those 5 areas of focus, like the collaborative problem solving and so on, just to have an understanding of how deeply they are entrenched in the system. For example, some of these, many or most teachers will have, or staff will have had training on. It would just be a point of interest to kind of build out those sections slightly. Not looking for a ton more, but just a little more detail would be much appreciated. And I am very grateful to have this report. Thank you very, very much.
Yes, and we can certainly do that, Vice Chair Al Harrison. I expect the next report might look quite different. It might contain a bit of a forecast to how we see ourselves repositioning some of these programs, maybe even rebranding some of them, getting away from some areas, enhancing some other areas. I think you'll see mention of a whole system bullying program in the next report. So you'll see more expansive and expanded annotations to those. We'll make sure of that. Over.
Okay. Vice Chair Harrison, do you have any follow-up or comment?
No, I don't. Thanks so much.
Okay, Trustee Gray.
Thank you. Through the chair to Superintendent Podger-Barrett. In looking at the data that you've recorded in Appendix 1, if you look at the difference between this year's statistics and last year's statistics in the 11 to 20 day area, it seems to be almost doubled. And I'm wondering, is that reflective of, or is it possible that that's reflective of a change or a shift towards more violent activities? Specifically, my question is, in the breakdown of these suspensions, are we seeing a rise in violence among the students that are being suspended? Over.
Thank you, Trustee Gray. Through the chair to you, I would suggest year over year, it's hard to say. Our trend is our suspensions have been rising, as is the province, since 2016. That's largely a bit of an elementary factor. I wouldn't say you could see that There's not enough data to support that in a year over year. I think these can just be provocative, isolate cases in a school. It can change drastically. For example, even if you look at our expulsions, we look like we're triple. But as many of you who served on the discipline committee last year know, we had 18 expulsions from April to the end of the school year last year. So we're probably actually, when you look at the end of the year, we'll come out ahead. So these things really do ebb and flow. A lot can involve a single incident or two that involves a couple of kids. It's very serious. The numbers are so low, it's hard to read too much more into them. Having said that, I would say that suspensions have been trending up provincially and locally since this year. They're probably, if you consider the growth, I'd like to correct for trustees our math in the percentage column on Appendix 1 when you look at the percent of students, which is interesting. It's actually a miscalculation in the totals. They're about 1.3% of students each year, which puts us very low provincially. Those columns just accumulated, and so it really overrepresents the percentages. They're about 1.33% this year and 1.34% if you actually do the math. So technically, we're a little bit behind even this year.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Podrick.
Okay, are there any other questions for Superintendent Podrick? Okay, nobody's popped up on the speakers list. So thank you very much for your report, and looking forward to getting the report in the fall.
Thank you.
Moving on to notices of motion. Trustees, are there any notices of motion? And if so, please use the red form to request to speak. Okay, seeing none. Director Miller, it's time for the director's report. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Vance. I have 3 items on the list tonight. The first one I will refer to Associate Director Bogue. It's around I know we talked about the operational plan, but I just want to be explicit around this. One of the vehicles we use to get information and data from students and staff is our Have Your Say survey. And I will pass it on to Associate Director Bogue to just give an update as to what's happening with that this year.
Thank you, Director Miller. Through the chair to trustees, Have Your Say is our annual survey, and trustees will recall that we use this to gather feedback from students, staff, and parents in the community. We normally would have gone out with this survey for this year in early February. At that point in time, we were still dealing with some labor issues, and that was a little bit problematic around how that was going to roll out. We deferred a little bit, and then still weren't really through some of the labor situations, and now we're in some different circumstances. So our decision that we've made, really, there's no effective way to manage that amongst all the other pieces this year, and so there would be no Have Your Say survey this year. We just as a reminder to folks, we did do a pretty extensive consultation through our consultant as part of the multi-year plan development. So this year is not a year without data; it's just different data. I think that's it for my comments for now.
Thank you, Associate Director Bogue. Chair Vance, are there any questions to Associate Director Bogue?
Nobody has come up on the speakers list yet. So
okay.
Go ahead to the next question.
Okay, I'll go to item 2. And I would like to preface this remark with our apologies to the trustees because this report is a walk-on during the director's report. It is unfortunate, but the circumstances we found ourselves in over the last month caused us to not follow our normal procedures in getting a report to the board in a timely fashion so that it could go out to the public. So the first time the public will see this report is also this evening. I know the local trustees have been made aware of it. but I will give a very brief introduction, then I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Newton to elaborate. At Viola Desmond, we are going to have a significant accommodation challenge in September, and we're going to have too many students for the building and the portables that are currently on site. And so I know Superintendent Newton, Superintendent Nagoy, Superintendent Puccetti, and various staff members have been working diligently trying to come up with a solution as to what to do with these students, as Milton number 11 has been delayed in its construction, and we have not yet heard about Milton number 12. So that delay has caused a domino effect in Milton, so that we are having significant accommodation challenges at Viola Desmond Elementary Public School. So again, I apologize. This would have been in the board package, but it would have gone through our regular processes. But with what's happening in school closures, etc., and the school shutdown, made it necessary for us to make a very quick, put a very quick report together. The report has actually they've been working on it for some months, but to put a very quick report together to get it to board, because it will remain public. It will be out in the public because of our staffing timelines and letting parents know. So I will stop there and turn it over to Superintendent Newton.
Superintendent Newton, we can't hear you.
Chair Drabent, I think many of us are experiencing the same issue. For some reason, the mute and unmute stops to work after a period of time, so we're having to go out and phone back in. So that could be what Superintendent Newton is doing at the moment. She may have hung up and is trying to phone back in, because I know she's here.
Yeah, that might have been her leaving in frustration, and I heard the chimes go, and we'll probably hear a beep very soon. So why don't we just give it a minute or so. Superintendent Newton, is that you?
Hello?
Hello, is that Superintendent Newton?
Yes, thank you for your patience. I did dial out and back in. I was ready on cue, so I apologize for that to the trustee. First of all, I would like to express my gratefulness that you're willing to read this report tonight for information and to have some understanding and empathy on why it's come tonight as opposed to our regular processes. Basically, we're looking at a 3-year plan in Milton. The growth in Milton has been uncharted, as we know, and right now the pressure really is on Viola Desmond. 2 Septembers ago, it opened with 600 students, and it's now projected for 2020 to open with 1,450 students. And that's really the big question: when does a school not become a school? And so we looked at a lot of options that we could do, including, as Dr. Miller said, a great team of 2 other superintendents and the entire planning department, busing department, and the staff at Viola, along with the leadership of a number of schools, to say, what could we do? So in the end, we wanted to really emphasize through Superintendent Puccetti and Superintendent Nagoy that this is not a money decision, and in fact, it's cost neutral as to whether we would try to do an outdoor school experience for students versus placing them at EC Drury as an option, or the third option was to reroute them to schools where they can become part of a school community for the remainder of this year, perhaps for the next 3 years, based on when developments for Milton 11 and Milton 12 might open. So recognizing that it's not a cost factor necessarily, it's going to cost about the same amount of money whether you're having them located to an outdoor site or locating to a number of schools. We have had to select a recommendation to reroute students who might arrive tomorrow or might arrive in the next 2 to 3 years in that area of Milton to register for school at Viola, to reroute them to 5 other schools. And you'll see the recommended pieces are all carefully calculated with the planning department, and my hats off to those folks who did such an amazing job, Michelle and Dom, in that area. Basically, we only accept registrations for children in kindergarten who currently have siblings in grade kindergarten to grade 7 at Viola Desmond, but all the others that would be new to the area would be rerouted through our tab Find My School to the 5 other schools listed, depending on where they are living or about to live, or if they're in the English program or French immersion program. And I thank you very much for reading it. I wanted to also highlight the staff at Viola Desmond was so excited to know that they have an amazing group of superintendents, particularly on the corporate side with business and facilities, willing to look at their proposal. And I put that link in there if you'd like to look at it sometime. But it really values the outdoor learning experience every day outside. And those are some possibilities that we might get to do down the road. But in the immediate future and in the next year or two, that might not be a real possibility. So I thank you very much. The reason why we also have to put this forward tonight is because elementary are in staffing collective agreements where they have to notify schools by this week to let them know how many grades and how many students will they staff for, and then those principals have to notify teachers of what their tentative assignment would be by next Tuesday, and then following that, within the next 3 days, post what vacancies might come from this. I can assure you that all the schools impacted are excited about this proposal in the sense that they really want to open their door to these students. It will mean additional portables at all of the schools, and but it will mean that the students then can be embraced into a school community and buy their wagon sweatshirts right off the hopper and be part of a school community. And each of the schools will still be under a 1,200 enrollment, which is better than looking at one school at 1,450. So I open it up for questions at this time.
Okay, we have a couple. Trustee Garrett, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to Director Miller. You mentioned that school number 11 has been delayed, and we don't know very much about school number 12. I have to say, and would like this on record because I keep saying we need more schools, and I've talked to our MPP about it several times. My constituents are not happy campers, and when they hear this, you know, you buy a new home just around the corner from the school and you can't walk there because you have to take a bus to one of 5 other schools. I'm absolutely in support of what Superintendent Newton has come up with the team, but what can we do about getting 11 started? You know, we need the hole dug in the ground, and we need this school ASAP. Over and out.
Through you, chairs of bench, you can hear me?
Yes.
Through you, chairs of bench, to Trustee Garrett, I certainly echo your frustration and that of your constituents as well. It is a challenging situation. The current stall in the Milton number 11 is approval to proceed to tender, and I think we are working with the ministry to do that, to get that process going. But I guess, as you can appreciate, the ministry is preoccupied with many other pretty serious stuff going on now. So I'm not sure how we can accelerate this process, but perhaps we can talk offline to see how we can work with the local MPP and to make that happen.
Thank you.
Okay, Vice Chair Al Harrison.
Thank you very much, through you, Madam Chair. My question it comes from sitting on a couple of boundary review processes recently where people who have lived close to a school because of similar scenarios have been redirected somewhere else for a number of years, and then they become part of the fabric of that school and very much, grow to love that school community. And then when the new school is available, they don't want to attend, or they want to stay where they are, basically. And topics like mental health, family disruption, all sorts of things come to the forefront of comments that are made. So, and I understand that. I just wonder how we are going to manage the communications piece around this, because presumably when the new school is built, as soon as possible, that those families would then be redirected back there. So, and maybe Milton is a different scenario than where the communities where I participated recently, but those are just some concerns that were raised.
Through you, Chair Drabens, to Vice Chair Al Harrison, I will begin on a general note, and then Superintendent Newton can weigh in specifically around the Milton, this particular situation with Viola Desmond around communication plans, etc. In a general way, sadly, the residents of Milton are quite used to this, both in our board and actually our coterminous board as well. It is very unfortunate because we have many kids in Milton who have been in 2, 3, 4, and in some instances, 5 schools in their brief educational experience. The challenge with what is brought up when we move students to a school, it is temporary, and it has to be temporary, because if we don't move them back to that new school, we're sitting with a new school with very few kids in it, and the schools that they have gone to quickly become overcrowded themselves. And this is particularly true of Milton and will be true of North Oakville as well. So really it is about, it's a temporary accommodation that is not inaffordable. And so you're right, though. Kids become attached to the new school and their teachers and so on, but they generally move with their teachers. They generally go back to the new school with their staff and the people they know, and they're going as one. It's the challenge is what the research has shown in the past is students that transition independently or individually often have a lot of difficulty in becoming accustomed to the new school and becoming well situated in their new placement. But when students all move en masse, they're also moving with all their friends and everybody else, and there are far fewer issues than there are if it's just a single student or just 1 or 2 moving. So, I mean, that's the best I can say in a general way, but I will let Superintendent Newton speak more specifically about the Viola Desmond situation.
Yes, and thank you very much, Director Miller, and back to the trustees. In terms of Milton is used to, as Director Miller has stated, they are used to being flexible, and they're used to building new sense of school community every several years. I have to say I commend the families for that very much so. Usually they're quite excited because it's another new school, a new opportunity, but also the opportunity that we are building schools so that they can walk to them. So the opportunity to move as a neighborhood back to a walk to school rather than as a neighborhood being bused. So to that end, they are accepting. You will see in the report there's an example of a communication letter after we have shared it with you tonight, that the principal at Viola will then relay that letter to their families that are currently at Viola to assure them that the students that are currently at Viola are staying at Viola, so that there won't be angst there. But then anybody new coming to register from now until September, when they go to register, they will be directed by their address to the other school. Again, the other schools will have a process of welcoming those students into their fold. We've also developed a letter for the builders through the planning department. They've written a nice letter to the builders to describe the situation too, so that it can be widespread known that the school that you think you're going to, that's being built, the development that's being built, that they clearly understand that they are not going to that school, that they will be bused to another school until Milton number 11 and the potential of Milton number 12 goes through the processes to be built. We also have a phone number that and email contact that will be presented to on our website for redirection, and then folks can phone directly planning, or they can phone our family of schools that will help them navigate through this. The reason why we're bringing it forward too today is because generally Viola Desmond receives 6 to 11 new registrations every week since they've opened. So they are at pretty much capacity right now, except for the few kindergartens that might move in who have siblings that are currently attending Viola. So there is a sense of urgency that we need to close registration immediately so that families can register to go to another school. Thank you.
Ms. Cheryl Harrison, do you have anything else?
I do. If I could just follow up to just reflect on the letter, the planning department letter dated March 25th. My opinion is that it would be great to have a line in this letter that explicitly talks about the next steps, i.e. that when that school is built, the intent is to bring those students back to the school. The letter currently outlines where they're going right now and how they'll be dispersed across the 5 different schools. But I think, again, just going back to the recent observations in some of the boundary reviews, just that either people forgot that it was explicitly stated somewhere or it wasn't necessarily, and I just think it would serve us well over the long term to just say that when that school is done, you'll be going there. Thanks.
If I could through the chair, I think we would be more prudent to say, based on upcoming boundary reviews, that that's how school populations will be determined. So we can't necessarily guarantee that you'll be returning to Viola necessarily. You might be directed to another boundary review that we have in Milton, to directed to either Milton 11, Milton 12. So I would be hesitant to dictate that we would redirect them back to a school that they have yet to attend. They have yet to attend Viola Desmond. I think we'd be on a safer side to do it that way. Thank you.
For sure. Absolutely.
Okay. Trustee Daniele.
Thank you very much. Wish I could say I wasn't used to this. I've seen this happen before. But in this case, this one will be a little more difficult, and we're going to need to be very careful with our communication. I appreciate that this came to us for information. This is not a decision being made by trustees. This is a decision that is being made operationally, and you're allowing us the opportunity to comment on it. However, I understand the expediency with which we need to work, but I know I was taken aback to get a call 3 hours ago and then get the report 2 hours ago and trying to go through it. So our community is also going to be justifiably concerned at the speed and the lack of any kind of input into it. So our communications need to be very, very clear, very concise, and very parent-friendly going forward. That's my little statement. I also have a question. I'm reading this. If I am reading this correctly, are we proposing that Chris Hadfield is going to go from 8 portables to 17 and then 20? That's a concern for me, to more than double the portables in the school, and hopefully we have a plan to manage that. That's me done.
Thank you. And through the chair, to Trustee Daniele, yes, again, I apologize for the expediency and the shortness of knowledge and awareness of this plan. We will carefully work with planning department, particularly with Chris Hatfield. It will appear that some of the students will not reach Chris Hatfield until a year or two, depending on when Milton number 12 is built. So it's really some of the schools that have been mentioned, they won't actually see students register at those schools until closer to a year or 18 months out. It's really the schools of Boyne and Anne J. MacArthur that will be impacted close today.
If I may follow up?
Go right ahead.
Yes, thank you. Again, I'm looking at the chart. I'm trying to make sense of all the charts that were sent to me today. I'm seeing Chris Hadfield go from 8 portables in 2019 to 17 portables in 2020. That tells me that's happening in 6 months. And so that means we're going to need to move quickly, because Chris Hadfield is a school, it was one of the first schools built in Milton and has a porta pack, and it fills up and it empties and it fills up and it empties. And I know that community gets very, very frustrated at always being what they see as the expediency to place students. And that they've had a trend of getting full, and then when it empties and they get back to their own school and their own quiet, then it fills again. So again, I want us to be really, really careful around parent sensibilities on this one. I recognize the need for it. I'm not going to say that I don't support this, because I do, because it is needed. But I think we also need to recognize that it is going to come as a shock to the community, and we're going to get significant pushback.
Through you, Chair Burns, to Trustee Daniele. I don't disagree at all, Trustee Daniele. I know Superintendent Newton has, and the entire team, including the principal of Viola Desmond, Davin Robertson, have been in conversations, talking with the community, etc. But it is still going to come as a surprise for the majority of people up there. So we will be careful with our communication and take your words carefully, because I don't disagree.
Thank you. May I have one more quick follow-up, please?
Yes.
Okay. And I recognize there is no elegant solution to this, and you've done the best that you can. Are the principals of the affected schools on board with this? Have they been a part of this decision? Do they know that's coming and they can start planning?
And thank you, through the chair, to Trustee Daniele. Yes, they have been part of the solution and have been trying to problem solve with us. If I could also draw your eye to the chart for Chris Hatfield, when you see, when across the top it says maximum portables, and you look down and it says 22 portables. If you look across, we're not putting 22 portables on Chris Hatfield. And if you look across, you'll see in 2019, so at the very bottom where it says total enrollment is 780. If you go down 2 lines, it says portable count of 8. If you move over to 2020, it's portable count of 8. So we're not going to be putting 20 portables on Chris Hatfield. And all the way through, you'll see the trend to 2024 by the planning department actually has us removing portables down to 4. So
I apologize. The chart I'm looking at says it goes from 8 to 17.
Okay, sorry. Then
I will go back and look at the chart and see if there's a mistake in the chart, but the chart that I'm looking at goes 8, 17, 20, 19, 19, 19. So I'm in the revised projection chart. So I will go back and look at that. Thank you for that clarification. I am now done.
Thank you.
Okay, there's no other speakers on the speakers list for this topic, so go right ahead to your next one.
Thank you, Chair Burns, and thank you to all trustees for understanding around this report. It is not the way we like to do business. It's not the way that we should do business, but unfortunately, given the circumstances we find ourselves in, that this is the way it had to be done this time around for that. And there is a tinge of unfairness to the Milton community, and we are fully aware of that, and we will do our best to communicate and help them to understand the dilemma we found ourselves in. I take both Trustees Garrett's and Trustees Daniele's comments to heart, and we will do our best to try to make this as best as it can be for those families and those kids in Milton. The third topic is clearly the most significant topic that we're dealing with, and the most significant topic the entire world is dealing with, and that's the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. I don't have to speak much about what this is doing to the world. We know that the impact is incredible and quite tragic for many, many people. So I have a few comments before we go. Then I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Ruddock, who's been chairing our committee. But I think the process we're going to do tonight, for the benefit of the trustees and any or all listening online, I've asked all the superintendents to go around and spend about a minute speaking about their area around how we are adapting to the current crisis and how we are prepared for the crisis if it continues for much longer. Everyone is aware that we are currently in a 2-week shutdown, and the Premier last week or this week announced that schools will not be in place by April 6th. Will not be going back to school in April 6th. We do not know when we will be going back. There's been no indication as to when. Some jurisdictions around the world and within this country, such as Alberta, has suspended for the school year. That gives them the possibility of returning this school year, but it also gives them the possibility of not. Some American areas, some American regions, areas have canceled school for the entire year. Universities are canceling, colleges are canceling. And so therefore we are in a giant, significant problem with students all over the world and education facilities. So we don't have much more information on when schools will reopen, and we don't know what they will look like when they will reopen. But we will, once we get through this bit of dealing with the current situation, start to prepare for that eventuality. But I would like to make a couple comments around the situation for the benefit of all. There is no question this is the most significant challenge the global community has faced in a great many years. It is certainly the most significant challenge that I have personally faced in my lifetime, and I would imagine most of the people sitting around the tables in Halton this evening, although I don't want to be presumptuous about that. It is a health crisis. Our federal governments and our provincial governments have given directions around closures, quarantines, etc., and there is a direct impact on our students in that they are not in school. And there's good reasons for them not being in school, and that's to slow down the spread of this virus. For most, this virus is not a critical illness, but for many, it is, and is causing loss of life and probably lifelong disabilities in others, for many others as well. And it's incumbent upon us to behave responsibly and act responsibly and follow the directions of our governmental leaders. And we in the Halton District School Board are doing just that. We are shut down. We will open up when we are required to open up, and we will be ready to open up when we are. But we're also fully aware that as educators and public servants, we are still working. We are still working, and we have income coming in. We may be experiencing family challenges with some of our families who may be ill or more vulnerable or more at risk, and we're fully aware of that, and so on. We're also fully aware that many of our students and their families and their families may be more at risk or more vulnerable to the illness of COVID-19, and we are certainly empathetic and our hearts go out to them. We're also very aware that economic challenges have started and will likely get worse, and they will likely get worse for many in the Halton community. We know that hundreds of thousands of people will be laid off. Some will lose businesses, maybe many will lose businesses, and many people will be hurting financially. This will no doubt cause stress and strain within families and within communities, And we in Halton will be no different than anybody else. And one of our primary jobs is, once we get back in school, is to help support those families and those, particularly the kids from those families, to get through these difficult times. It's also our job to help them get through these times right now, the current time, through our education and through learning continuity, which we will describe a little bit. So finally, I would just like to say this before I turn it over to Superintendent Ruddock, that we are so grateful as educators to the work of our healthcare professionals, our doctors, nurses, scientists, lab technicians, people testing, paramedics, and other first responders, but primarily our healthcare workers who are doing superlative work and are out there, and they are the real heroes of this situation at this moment. But I don't also want to forget that people working in grocery stores, delivery drivers, all those people that are making sure there's food, pharmaceuticals available, and so on too. They all live and work in Halton as well, and they have their families and their schools. I've heard from a great many doctors and healthcare professionals who are parents in our board, worried about their kids, worried about their communities, and they're the ones on the front line. So we are grateful for the work they are doing. So thank you for that. I will turn it over to Superintendent Ruddock, who will kind of run this kind of 1-minute session, and then we'll open it up for questions from trustees. I do caution everybody that there's lots of answers we will not have tonight, but please ask the questions anyway, and we will try to get those answers. Thank you. Superintendent Ruddock.
Thank you, Director Miller. Through the chair to trustees. I'm happy to give you an update this evening. This team that meets daily, the COVID team, we formed in late January, and I think we were about 6 people at that time, and it's now grown to 26 people, including all of our superintendents on the team, as well as some additional corporate staff and system principals. But I would also like to add that with every superintendent on the team, there is a larger team working with that SO, IPL, system principals, corporate staff. Truly an incredible team that's done an amazing amount of work in a short period of time to get us here today. And we're going to share with you a lot of what work has been done. I will say, though, that our work has been really focused on the immediate, what is essential for right now, what's critical, services that we need to continue to deliver. And so anything around what may happen in May or June, we're not there yet. We're really focusing on what are the issues in front of us today. As I said, we meet every day. It's about an hour and a half. We triage issues. We forecast what is coming next. We make many decisions, and really difficult decisions, everything from, as we've already talked about, postponing large group events, to how we can manage the volume of refunds, of course, not to mention the continuity of learning and working from home expectations. We had a second team, the pandemic planning team. We've now really merged those 2 teams given the size of the COVID team and the overlap of work. But the other aspect of this team's work moving forward is the pandemic planning, which was formerly with the Pandemic Planning Working Group. And this is really focused on planning how we organize the work. And as I said, our first phase of this was really focusing on what is critical, what's essential, such as payroll and ensuring that our employees are paid, ensuring our bills are paid. The next phase of our work is going to be, if this shutdown extends much beyond the initial 2 weeks, what other tasks are now coming on board that we need to start looking at to address. And certainly if it reaches far beyond the initial 2 weeks, and if we don't reopen until September, what work needs to be done to make sure that we're ready for September. So there's a lot of planning in addition to the daily triage of work. So I'm going to call on the superintendents that are involved on the team to speak to each element of their work, again, focusing on the immediate needs of the work right now. And with that, I'll turn it over to Associate Director Bogue to speak about the continuity of learning.
Thanks, Superintendent Ruddock. So we have a group of superintendents who are leading this work, and certainly our administrators in our schools are leading it, and we know we have an incredibly talented teaching staff out there in our schools who will have creative ways to help us with this as well. We've, for the purpose of this update, I've chunked this update into two pieces. One is, what is the work for the next couple of weeks? And then I'll spend just a brief amount of time talking about the longer term. So in the short term, meaning in the original 2-week closure period, we know that our main task was to have our teachers working on how do we plan for the longer term. And so that means taking our programs, courses, curriculum, resources, and making them into a distance learning format from what was likely traditionally a more face-to-face format. And so our teachers will be busy doing that work. We know that in the short term, in this couple of weeks, we're going to need to help provide some support around training and learning for teachers if they're moving now to more of an online distance learning format. We have a couple of learning management systems that we typically use, D2L in high schools and Google Classroom in high schools and elementary schools, and so there'll be some training pieces there. We're also looking at, are there tools that teachers are needing to do this work? For example, technology and resources and things that might be in the school right now and may not be accessible to them, so there may be some creative ways of using different kinds of resources so that we can dig into some of this work. One of the other priorities in the first 2 weeks, of course, was we wanted our teachers to be reaching out to families to get kids learning again immediately. So we did craft a message to our administrators, a scripted message that they would share with each of their teachers, and ask that a message go out to all of their families. And the message really was had three pieces to it. One was around trying to understand the family needs around technology. Are families able to continue to learn online using technology? We wanted to know that because that was important. If there's not technology there, we're going to have to problem solve how to work with that particular student. We wanted to direct families again to to our board website for resources and information, particularly around where to go if families are in need of support. Things like food programs that are not in place now that schools are not running, and social emotional needs and those kinds of things. We wanted families to be sure there was a place to get information. And then thirdly, we really wanted to ensure that kids had access to learning materials over this first 2 weeks. And we heard about the ministry's release of Learn at Home resources. So we reiterated those. We have a number of board resources that are available online as well. And we wanted teachers to provide a little bit of specific direction around the actual courses for high school kids or grade and class materials for our elementary students so that the kids would stay connected to the learning that was happening within their classroom environment. So that was sort of the immediate pieces to get things moving. Longer term, and we don't have answers, but I'd like to just identify some of the things that we will need to address long term. And we know this is going to be really messy. We get that. We have done a little bit of work with our unions. We know that's important to have them on side here with us as well. And we're looking at all of the challenges now that we are going to need to deal with. Things like the continued teaching and learning in programs where it's not conducive to an online or distance format. You might think about things like physical education or construction course for a couple of examples. What do they look like in an online format? We know that there are also lots of other issues related to things like how do we support students with special education needs, English as a second language needs. We know that student technology might be a challenge, so we're working on that, as I mentioned earlier. Student mental health supports. Transition planning, I think Trustee Collard or one of the trustees mentioned that earlier. Depending on when we return to school this spring, we may have a really small window of time to do transition planning for our kids. So there's lots and lots of things that we're working on, more questions right now than answers. but we will continue to work through these over the next couple of weeks and beyond. That's it for now for me. Thank you.
Thank you. And over to Superintendent Blackwell for a school operations update.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. In these unique times, we're working remotely to address, again, some of the immediate work. We're modifying processes for families to support requests for transcripts, as well as the registration of students. We know that we will have people that are moving at this time of year, and we're facilitating a process in terms of the school-based contact and as well as the Welcome Center. We've also sent messaging to families waiting for decisions around optional attendance and appeals so that they're aware that this process has been delayed, and we'll be reaching out to them very shortly. That's it for me.
And for a school programs update, first we'll start with Superintendent Salmini and then Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, good. So we are doing a number of things in school programs. The supporting student learning outside the classroom resources have been posted. That happened yesterday on the HDSB website. And there are 4 links in elementary, one for kindergarten, for primary, for junior, and for intermediate students. And they all have suggested activities, ideas, and links to other resources and programs and places that families can go to support learning in the various subject areas within those divisions. Library Services has also updated the online resources available on our HDSB website for families. And we know that people have been accessing that. There's a rich variety of material there. Additionally, families can follow at HDSB Kids Learn on Twitter, where there will be daily activities for students posted in various subject areas, including literacy, math, outdoor ed, French, science and tech, as well as kindergarten. And finally, school programs and IT staff are currently working together on developing modules for educators to support them in providing distance learning opportunities for their students. That's it for me.
Hi, Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons here, and I do believe this time I can be heard.
Yes.
Yep, we can.
Wonderful. Okay. Just to complement that piece, the secondary program team has been working on this continuity of learning as well. What the ministry has posted for secondary students is specific to the more popular courses that happen to be in the province. And so there are many courses that just don't appear there. And so the messaging to teachers to reach out to students to let them know where they were in their course and things that they can be doing at home. We have surveys out right now of both staff and students in terms of technology and connectivity. The IPLs are busy working on gathering resources, sharing through our subject-specific Google groups, creating how-tos for online learning using both Brightspace and G Classroom, which many of our staff are already very, very familiar with, and consulting appropriately to ensure that all issues of equity are addressed. So as David mentioned, we have some long-term challenges we need to overcome, and we're looking creatively to overcome any challenges of equity, of opportunity, of access, of resources, etc. So we're quite busy as well. Thank you.
And for Student Services, Superintendent Zonneveld?
Yes, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. Thanks. In Student Services, we've been quite busy as well. Staff right now are focusing on supports for teachers as they are about to begin this distance learning with their students. So making sure that they have the supports available to them to help them understand how best to support students with special needs through this new medium. So we're breaking it down by exceptionality so that they have a menu of tools to draw upon to serve students, for example, with learning disabilities or with autism, etc. So breaking down the types of resources and strategies that they can use for the different types of students, their needs, but also preparing resources for parents, knowing that parents in many ways are going to be the prime educators of their children over the coming weeks. And so we want to make sure that we have some resources for them as well. So those are also in development and will be out soon. We've also developed some resources for both parents and teachers around student mental health, knowing that many of our students required support prior to all of what's going on, but we have certainly students who are even more impacted by this current situation. So these tip sheets are resources for staff and parents with a number of really helpful links as well of where they can turn for how to support students during this time. Also, our professional services staff are developing guidelines and doing training for how to support students virtually. So we have a number of things in development so that staff can reach out to students who they were previously serving. We're working with our current caseloads. We want to make sure we're serving those students first. And that's going to look different across those different disciplines because I think we can do a better job, or maybe it's an easier job to start of serving students, for example, that would be served by social workers and child and youth counselors. We can do some of that work virtually. It's a little more challenging, for example, with our psychology staff and our speech-language pathologists. So, but we're working on that as well, and there's some good networking across the province on how we can do that. We're also developing a guide for schools about how to move ahead with their school resource team meetings, including parent participation virtually, so that we can move ahead with that process and make sure that we're supporting students as needed with that process. And that extends into IPRCs as well, because we need to do those effectively moving ahead, both for now and for some of the placements that students are looking for the fall. So we do need a little bit of a legal consult on that as to make sure we comply with the legislation, but we are moving ahead with that also. And I think I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. For facility services and business services, we'll start first with Superintendent Puccetti and then Superintendent Ngoy.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Ruddick. I hope everybody can hear me okay. Just to update you, all the schools have now received a deep clean, and they have been closed since last week, with the exception of a few schools where we do have major construction projects. Those schools will receive a deep clean prior to students and staff coming back to the building so that the contractors can continue to do work in the building. We have disabled all swipe cards and keypads to the building so that we can control access into the buildings. Right now, the only people going into our schools are our field supervisors and our security contractors to do a visual check of the spaces. And they do this every 2 days. They also walk around the building and check the portables. Just to say, we've also canceled community use of schools through our permits, and we're in the process of letting all the community users know. And of course, if the situation changes, we'll do our utmost to reinstate community use permits. Similarly, with childcares and before and after operators, we've also let them know that they will not be charged rent while the school remains closed. And we are looking at the impact of the shutdown on our construction schedule for tendering school renewal projects to see what we can move or defer to later months and still get some of the work done at school. So that's it for me from facilities. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's
Roxana Ngoy, and I have a few updates from a business services perspective. We've been working very hard behind the scenes to try to process as many payments as we can, pay as many invoices as we can. The team has been working from home. However, there's a lot of limitations when you look at paying invoices, as a lot of those would be through coming through mail. We have put a hold on mail and deliveries at this point. However, with the news that schools will remain closed past April 6th, we are going to redirect them centrally and have a look and sort through the mail so that we can do our part and pay the bills that we have for the services that were rendered and goods that were received. That means we've divided the accounts payable team into two separate teams, and with very limited access to the board office. They're going to be going in on a rotating basis. We're working on a protocol on what that would look like in terms of going in and sanitizing and making sure that we're taking care of our staff as they go into the building. We're looking at processing the invoices we do have right now in the mail and have a communication ready for all of our vendors, including school vendors, to forward any future invoices electronically to our generic accounts payable email. And we would like to no longer process paper invoices going forward to the extent possible. At this point, we're not putting in any new orders unless it's an emergency order, cleaning supplies with facility services or any other emergency repair. And we are also drafting communication for schools to share with our parents in terms of refunds for the trip cancellations, as well as refunds for the other fees that would have been paid through school-generated funds, which have been at this point suspended, and we're working on a process to reimburse parents for anything that they have been that they might have been paid for, but those activities will no longer take place. We are going to communicate also a process for employee reimbursements, again, looking at doing everything electronically and for direct deposits. And we'll reach out to trustees as well in terms of this process. And we're working on March 31st ministry reporting, which is the 7-month report required for the provincial consolidation. The timing is fast approaching, and we're waiting on hearing some updates in terms of how we will complete this, as not a lot of the transactions might be processed on time, given the times we're in, and also looking for a timeline clarification, as they may potentially be looking at an extension. With the budget, we are assuming the same timelines for now. However, with the provincial budget being put on hold, we are expecting that the Minister of Education will provide us with some more clarification later, hopefully later this week, in terms of where we are with expecting the grants for student needs release. And that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you. And over to Superintendent Truffin for Information Services and Superintendent Podribarek for Safe Schools.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Reddick, and good evening, everybody. Just update from Information Services. Our number one priority for IT is to keep our systems running remotely. Our data center, which gives us connectivity, is being monitored daily, and we are also doing our backups to preserve our data. Over the last couple of weeks, we've worked with multiple departments to ensure that staff have a safe and secure connectivity while at home, and this, of course, includes multi-factor authentication. David and Julie Tina have already indicated that we're working closely with the program department to help support the online learning any way we can. We also know next steps we'll be working with staff across other departments to access other core applications, because we aren't sure how long this will go on for, and we know that some of the applications will need to have access. In terms of communication, we've done some emergency contact lists for all of our 10 employee groups, so we can push out information to them very quickly, and it will be delivered right to their mailboxes. And just to let you know, our IT staff, they are working quite hard. They're monitoring our top desk, which is our ticket system, and they're cleaning up tickets. Staff are putting in tickets, and as soon as staff are putting in tickets, we're doing our best to give them assistance. And just from an overall perspective, we are operating on the absolute providing the best customer service we possibly can. We have an attitude of it's a yes, yes, we will do whatever we can. However, we're just asking that some of the requests might take time because we want to make sure that our network is protected. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gord. From a Safe Schools perspective, we are in certainly a different and unique phase. These days are coded as instructional days, so we've notified schools if they do have incidents. Might be things like cyberbullying come up. We are here to help and support them. Concepts such as nexus of the school get very complex, so we are going to work through and support schools if those come up. We've also extended all hearings and appeals that may come by mutual consent with parents, so we've reached agreements there to extend those to a logical startup time, whenever that may be. In terms of childcare, Maya touched on a few things, but I would just like to add that we have volunteered one of the board's childcare sites that are co-located, if needed, with Halton Region and the ministry to offer emergency childcare for essential workers if needed. So they'll let us know if that is needed, and we're open to working with them to accommodate that. And we do meet weekly with all 11 of our childcare partners just to keep them in the loop and updated. That's it for me.
Thank you. And now for an update from Human Resources, Superintendent McFadden, and then to Superintendent Pennyfather for donations and food security.
Thank you. Through the chair, HR has, of course, been focusing on our one core function of paying people accurately throughout the shutdown period, and that includes permanent and occasional teacher employees, and doing so remotely. So that is a huge task, and I must commend our IT department who have gone above and beyond to set us all up with remote access and problem solve a number of serious issues with providing this service off-site. But it is happening and it is accurate. So also a shout out to all of the staff of HR who've made that happen. As you know, we're also involved at this time of the year in staffing for next year. So we have migrated that to an online system, and that has proven to it's a very paper-focused and usually done in in-person meetings with our principals. So all of that is happening online and is going very well in elementary. Secondary, we had postponed due to the class size issues, but that resolved itself shortly before the shutdown. So we are engaging in conversations with OSSTF about how we can start up the secondary staffing process and how that can be done remotely. Posting, recruitment, interview, hiring, all of that is still needing to take place because babies are still being born, so people are going off on leave and they still need to be replaced. We anticipate that, unfortunately, we'll be facing some illness due to COVID-19, so we know we will have to have processes in place to replace those workers who become ill. All of this requires a knowledge of what working at home looks like, both from what tasks need to be done and how do we inform our staff who are at home of what tasks and responsibilities we expect from them. So all of that's taking place through staff communication in conjunction with conversations with our union partners. So that's a high overview from HR. Thank you.
Greetings. I'm hoping you can hear me.
Yes.
Good. There's two stages, or two parts to this. The first is that, as we all know, watching the news, one of the worries with addressing COVID-19 are shortages for our frontline medical workers or shortages of other materials. And there's some discussion about folks who aren't using them now, how can we share them? And we do have some of those kinds of materials. The ministry, government, and local hospitals and medical providers, the intent is to coordinate the allocation centrally. But what we are doing at this point is we are currently conducting inventories centrally and also through our administrators at school sites to support this effort. So when requested, we're ready to go, and we can get the supplies to those folks who need them. The next part is a good news story, and it's about food security. We have a number of wonderful partners, Food for Kids, Food for Thought, and Food for Life, who have different functions with providing food security to our students. And they continue to work with our coterminous board and us to make sure this is happening. Food gift cards are being mailed home because from Food for Kids, because they can't be dropped, those little nice bags that arrive at schools on Friday. So instead, they're mailing home the cards. And Food for Thought is transferring funds over to other agencies so that they can get food to our students. And Food for Life is actually coordinating an effort where they're actually going to do home delivery of food packages to families that need them. And they've already been working with Halton Housing to make this happen. The next stage is that we're actually going through our principals to make sure we check on those students who we know may need this support, and we're going to contact those families and hook them up with Food for Life so that home delivery of food can happen. After that initial stage, they will be going out wider in the community because, as you know, more people may be getting in the position of not having food security than before this started. The good news from the folks at Food for Life is there's lots of food out there right now to distribute. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, over to Superintendent Itoff for communications updates.
Thank you, Colette. Obviously it's been a busy time in communications, supporting lots of different needs, both internally as well as with our external communications. In terms of internal communications, obviously working with representatives from lots of different departments with respect to lots of different messaging. As you've been seeing, we've been sending regular updates out to staff, as well as to our families, as well as to the broader community as well. Certainly, a big piece of work over the last few days has been building out our website to support the continuity of learning, and so you'll see that there's now a slider on our main homepage of our website for ease of access for parents to get into our website and see and find the ministry portal, as well as our Maiden Halton resources that are located there. It's been a busy place. Within the first 24 hours of putting up that page with those resources, we've had over 4,000 visits. So certainly our parents and families are taking advantage of those resources right away. We have made a caution with respect to families engaging with and staff as well in terms of promoting third-party resources due to privacy concerns. So that's certainly been noted on our website as well as through our messaging. We have done certainly a great deal of support With respect to what Associate Director Bogue spoke about in terms of that whole check-in process and our staff engaging with our students, and so I won't go over those pieces because Associate Director Bogue went through them earlier. But a big piece of the messaging that went out yesterday for our families, of course, lots of disappointment, I'm sure, with the many cancellations and postponements. We're working with our administrators and have provided a number of different resources and letters that they can use now that they pick up the ball and reach out to their families directly with the various different cancellations. For example, excursions, both domestic and international, between now and the end of the year. We've developed resources to support our administrators in communicating important information, including refund processes. The social distancing piece certainly has been something that has come up, and I know our facility service staff, and as you may have noted as well, across virtually all our jurisdictions, playgrounds are being closed, signage is going up. We developed some messaging today and posted it on social media. Within the first 5 hours, we've had over 7,000 impressions and 400 engagements. So certainly we are getting the messaging out there and getting lots of positive feedback in return. I guess the final piece that I will speak to, and it really brings us back to the beginning of the meeting with Trustee Lau's questions, is we are developing a very comprehensive Q&A on the COVID area of our website, which again is accessible through the slider on the homepage. And as questions are coming in through our contact us at hdsb.ca, through that email address, we're filtering those out to the various different departments, finding the answers, getting back to those individuals personally, and then if they are new questions, we are posting them on our Q&A. So that's being updated on a regular basis. We're doing the exact same thing with our staff. We have a whole separate staff Q&A set up and separate email addressed for issues and concerns and questions particular to staff members. And that's it for me.
Thank you. So as you can hear, it's truly an immense amount of work that has been accomplished in only a week and a half, which is kind of astonishing when you think about the fact that it's only been a week and a half. One last piece I'll just add is that yesterday we hosted virtual meetings with all of our administrators, both elementary and then secondary. And they are, of course, connecting with their staff and families and leading a lot of this work in their virtual schools. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to Director Miller.
Director Miller?
Sorry, Chair Devents, I was still muted. Through you, Chair Devents, to you and all the other trustees, we apologize that took some time, but we thought it was necessary that you hear what's going on department by department and what's going on in the board, as I'm sure you are getting questions from staff, community, you may get questions from vendors, you may get all sorts of questions. So we thought that the more information trustees could be armed with, the better it would be. The purpose of it was not to describe how hard everybody's working, because you know that they're already working very hard. And I'm so proud of this team of superintendents and the senior team and the rest of the staff, our general managers, who are all on these meetings and working hard. The purpose was to say that we're trying our best to address all the issues that have arisen out of this, and we're trying to anticipate issues that we have not yet found, but for sure will emerge. And to say, the one caveat around this whole thing is a little bit of this is trial and error. And there are going to be mistakes. Sometimes we won't communicate as well as we'd hope we would. Sometimes we won't get the IT working as well as we would want, and so on. This has all been fast and very furious. We're essentially redesigning the delivery of education that we've been doing for years and years and years in a 2-week period. So forgive us for some of the errors we make. I can tell you the intent is always positive and to make this the best possible scenario for our students and their families. So with that, I will pass it back to the chair, and I'm assuming there'll be several questions.
There is a growing list. So first we'll start with Trustee Collard.
And Chair Gerbens, can I ask that the questions be directed to me, and then I will distribute them to the appropriate people? That's the best way to do it, I think.
Sounds great. So Trustee Collard, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Through you to Director Miller. So with the very possible circumstance that kids might not be going back to school this year, Bateman is closing. Their very last commencement was supposed to be in June and might happen in the fall instead. Their closing ceremonies probably won't be happening. And I'm wondering how we give them the opportunity to celebrate their school, if we're giving any thought at all to just having it everything in the fall the way it would have been in June. It's an emotional time for them, and now this has compounded it, obviously. I'm wondering if any thought's gone into that.
Through your Chair Gerbens to Trustee Collard, some thought has gone into it for sure, and I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Blackwell in a second. We certainly empathize with that community, and this is not something that we could have ever have wanted for that community, and they're being denied some closure, very emotional closure for a school that means a great deal to them and was the heartbeat of that community for many, many years. I think it's incumbent upon us to try to figure out, and we have started our conversations around how we can address, in particular, the closing ceremonies. The commencement is somewhat a little easier to address because, as you are aware, many of our schools used to have fall commencements, and it's only been in recent years that we've gone all to June commencement. So, we can address that, but, the other part is a prom for the Bateman kids, which they would do, but they would certainly, they may have done their own or combined with their new schools, whatever, but these are issues that we'll try to address. I'll pass it to Superintendent Blackwell to see if she has anything to add.
Thank you, Director Miller, through the chair. Just very quickly, as we've been talking tonight, and I echo Director Miller's comments for sure. We have fit with one of the thoughts that we've already had on the table. We've had both principals of Bateman. Actually, all three principals have already reached out. We will continue to meet. I think we have to wait and see when school resumes. We may be back this year, so we don't want to make plans saying let's put everything to the fall and not be able to talk to some of the kids and find ways to find out what they need within their own community, because they often give us some really good advice. So it is on our radar. We do have committees, and we've also been very successful with our Google Hangouts. So that's something that we can do to draw those committees back together. So that will be happening.
Thank you. May I follow up?
Sure.
Yes.
On my follow-up, I'm concerned about transitions for students with special education needs, particularly those in the CPP program. I know there were supposed to be visit days for them to go to Nelson this spring to see the facilities, get familiar with it, get comfortable with it. And I'm really concerned that if they don't have that opportunity at some point before September, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for them to transition. And I'm wondering what, if any, plans have been coming forth on that.
Go ahead, Director Miller.
No, go ahead, Superintendent Blackwell.
Yeah, and that is one of the discussion points in terms of how we do operationalize everything. When we find out when we have access to the building, right now we don't. As you know, the city of Burlington is a state of emergency. We know that the construction is continuing, so it's actually putting us in a good spot at this point. And we will put that on our radar and communicate that directly with families.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Trustee Garrett. Trustee Garrett?
Yes, thank you. To the Director, I don't know if you are aware that up in northern Halton, where I live, where I'm sitting right now, where I'm very lucky that I actually have internet to see my computer tonight and cell phone service to actually speak with you guys. Some days we don't. And I guess my question is it being looked at and considered for our students? There's a lot of pressure on our high school kids that, they should be checking their internet, they should be doing their courses, blah, blah, blah. But if they don't actually have the service, because in some spots there is zero service up here, how are those kids going to do their workload?
Through you, Chair of Events, to Trustee Garrett, I am going to pass it on to Associate Director Bogue after a couple comments from me. We are fully aware of that, and we know that around the province that's a significant issue, and we've even looked at some creative possibilities like using the post office as an example. But I'll turn it over to Associate Director Bogue because we're aware of those issues.
Thanks for that, Director Miller. And that is certainly one of the reasons that we're trying to get a baseline right now to try to understand how many families we are may have to look at some alternative measures for through surveying each teacher surveying their kids. You might notice that you've heard some of the superintendents use the term distance learning rather than online learning because, as Director Miller says, there are lots of areas in the province where internet connectivity is really difficult. So I think we're right at the beginning stages, but we have made a commitment, even in talking to our unions, that we're going to have some flexibility around how this happens, and it will not be a one-size-fits-all solution. So we're just digging into it, and we can certainly update trustees more as we start to understand how this is going to play out a little bit with any more detail. Thanks.
May I have a follow-up?
And I would just add to that before we follow up, Trustee Garrett, that I have regular calls with directors in Ontario, both all the public boards, but all the boards, French Catholic, French Public, and Catholic boards, in addition to conferences twice a week with the ministry. And we are sharing ideas on how we can do these things. So we recognize it's a provincial issue, and we are looking at good ideas that are coming around the province that could be applied to Halton. And I'm done.
Go ahead, Trustee Garrett.
Okay, just a quick follow-up on that. And it really is for the staff at this point, because the staff are also expected to be using their internet and their technology at home. Are we covering the costs? Are there extra costs involved covering our staff's internet?
Through you, Chair of Events, to Trustee Garrett, most of the big providers have announced that there will not be additional charges and there'll be unlimited data and that, so there should not be any additional charges for our staff using their personal devices. But I would add this, and I have mentioned this to our union counterparts, and I'm not trying to be cold-hearted about it, but staff will also be not having to drive to work. So on the one hand, there'll be some savings for them in terms of gas mileage. That may not offset it, but I think the fact that the big providers are going to allow for unlimited data. If obviously costs get too high, we will have to look at that. We don't anticipate that as an issue in our conversations, though.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Trustee Lau.
Hi, I'll just keep this super quick. Two things. First, I sent out all of the questions. I put it all into a document, and I sent that to all of the trustees. But I couldn't find the group to send it to the superintendent, so I put it there. So I don't know if one of you could share it. And then the second thing, yesterday, one of the Instagram accounts that I follow, it's Robert Bateman Prom 2020. It's run by 3 students who have said that they're not canceling prom because they're not affiliated with the HDSB, and apparently kids have already paid and things like that. But they said that they were looking to push it into the summer. I'm not sure. I just wanted to bring that up, I guess.
Through your chair of events to Trustee Lau, I received your questions and I have put them to the appropriate people, so you're good with those. As for that, yeah, we have a mixture of proms in this board. We have some proms that are run by the schools, and those are the ones we've canceled. And some proms have been run by students and parents in the past, and they go off-site and they do it, and it is not, and I repeat, not a school event. There's no staff there, there's no staff input, there's no advertising in the school, et cetera, and so on. So I can't speak about what goes on specifically at Robert Bateman, but those do happen. And it's up to them to run it. However, I think that will be superseded by directions from the provincial government on large gatherings of people and so on as we get into this COVID. If it's in the summer sometime, we would have no ability to stop it, and nor would we stop it if the government is allowing large group activities. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but that's the general a general answer to it.
Sounds good. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, Trustee Gray.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, as we all know, the government has released documents, an online portal available, which enables students at every grade level to continue learning while away from school. There have been questions in my community specific to the fact that some of these online programs are not directly addressing the needs of students, particularly in special programs like life skills. I think tonight I recorded in listening to Superintendent Sonnenfeld that there are supports for teachers, and they're about to begin to learn more about helping through long distance learning, and that they're breaking it down by exceptionalities, and that there will be resources and strategies provided. Specifically, my question is this: is there in fact consideration being given to the release of distance learning materials and resources for students in the life skills program? And secondly, will the board be permitting life skills students to access technology such as Chromebooks from their home schools during the period of time that they're not permitted to be in school?
Through you, Chair of Events, to Trustee Gray, I'm going to direct most of the answer to this question to Superintendent Sonnenfeld, but I don't want to paint this as a totally rosy picture for the trustees or for the community. We strive to break down all inequities. We always have done. It's going to be a greater challenge during this time around the things that Trustee Gray has identified, that Trustee Garrett's just identified, that Trustee Caller just identified. And it pains me to say it, but I think there will be circumstances that we have a very difficult challenge in meeting that those circumstances. So with that, I'll turn it over to Superintendent Sonnenfeld.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Great. So through the chair, Trustee Gray, definitely we have identified this as a priority that first, the students in those self-contained classes, we're going to work closely with those teachers to help them with what those strategies look like. And certainly for some of our students with more complex needs, this gets more and more challenging, as the director intimated. So, we're certainly going to do our best to support those teachers and also parents, knowing the burden that sits with them at home. So, that's an area of focus for us. In terms of technology, we're aware that a number of our students rely heavily on the technology that they have at school. Some of it is the assistive devices, and in others, it's other mobility devices that they have. So, but specifically around the assistive tech, many of those students didn't bring those devices home with them. So we are, teachers in general across the system are going to be doing a bit of an inventory with their students to see what they have at home, both in terms of devices and connectivity. And that includes students in self-contained classes. And then as we get a sense of what those needs are at home, I know we're going to be looking at how we can meet those needs, perhaps through devices that we have or other means, and that's maybe where I should hand this off to Superintendent Truffin.
Superintendent Truffin?
Yeah, sorry. Thank you very much, Superintendent Zonfeld. Yeah, there's no question. I think you're asking me about technology that could be potentially be sent home with students?
Yes.
Yeah, right now, there is no question that we have a lot of technology at our schools, and we are getting an inventory. I know Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons and so many principals are working, getting what type of technology our students and families need, and when and if we can get into schools and start to get a system in place to give out this technology for the families that need them, we're happy to do that, and we want to do that. Absolutely. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much, both of you.
Okay, so Trustee Reynolds. Trustee Reynolds?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Sorry. Through the chair, I had heard Associate Director Bogue speak this evening about short-term and long-term planning. Short-term meaning the next few weeks. So I'll frame my question, and I guess it's two parts around that. In terms of an immediate need for continuity of learning, and perhaps a question that could be put on the Q&A as a placeholder. I have heard from parents who are looking for support for their elementary students who are in French immersion programming. Their concern stems from their perspective that their children are learning French and they are not French language proficient themselves. And I was wondering if you could address what supports are going to be available to help these parents who are English speaking only in helping their kids in the French immersion programming.
I can, do you want me to jump in, Director Miller?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks for this question, Trustee Reynolds. It's a good question. We've started to dig into this. This is one of the examples where there's no perfect solution out there, I think. There are some pretty good online French resources where kids can get some language pieces. But again, we're just starting to dig into this and we don't have a final answer. I wonder whether Superintendent Salmini may have a little bit more insight and can share with you. But I will say that this is on our radar and one of our questions to look into. That's it for now for me.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So through the chair to Trustee Reynolds, this is on our radar, and our instructional program leader with responsibility for French is currently reaching out to her counterparts and other boards and trying to get as many resources and suggestions and things that we can put out to families in that area. And that's it for me.
Okay, follow-up, please.
Yes.
So perhaps, I guess, from a long-term perspective, something that parents would want to know is, in for kids who are in the French immersion, maybe even English language learners, I think parents would want to know how their students would progress on or advance to another grade under this current challenge. And I'm putting this question out there because I know that it's something that would be on many people's minds, but if you could perhaps put that as a placeholder as the ministry, I guess, gives us more information. But I think parents would want to know how this current crisis is going to impact their kids from advancing.
Through your chair of events to Trustee Reynolds, yeah, we can certainly put that, and we will put that as a placeholder somewhere because, the reality is we're only into day 3 of this shutdown, and last week being March break, some of the conversations that we would have liked to have had, we couldn't have because some people were away from our programming perspective. But we're into those now, and I think we will need some certainty around when schools will open as well, which hopefully we will get in the coming days or coming weeks around that. So there is going to be a lot of ambiguity here and a lot of, which is not heartening for parents to hear for sure. I understand that completely, but I don't know how we can avoid it because parents like certainty, as I do as a parent, and we want that certainty, but unfortunately, there's not a lot of certainty that we can provide at the moment. The only thing that's really certain is we're doing our best with the information available and the tools available to try to get it out there. But you make a very good point, and we will certainly put it out there so that we can, assuage parents' anxiety further down the road. I don't think we can assuage anybody's anxiety at this point in time, but we're doing our best to try to do that. But okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Oliver.
Through you, Chair. In thinking about food security in our community, many of our schools have breakfast and snack programs and they have supplies of food items in their cupboards and fridges. So, this food is currently available and might potentially go to waste. And we're talking about things like granola bars, yogurt tubes, cheese sticks, etc. Maybe some frozen bread in the freezer. And these are things that are in short supply in some of the stores as their supply chains are affected. So I'm wondering if we can get these food items out of the schools and share them with families in need and or our local food banks. I know we've heard about deep cleaning and very limited access into the schools, but I wonder if with some advice from public health, we can work out a quick and safe way to get in and out of the school without much disruption to the cleaning that's been done and in ways that will support infection control. Thank you.
I will take this question through you, Chair of Events, to Trustee Oliver. It's a good idea, but I'm afraid we won't be doing it. We've ordered our schools closed, and we now know that some of that food may have been in there for 10 days. And there's a quality control issue around the food that would actually be in there, and we're really not equipped to have inspections of the food. Is this appropriate or is this whatever? Superintendent Pennyfather may want to weigh in around how we're working with, as he talked in his presentation around safety equipment and so on, that it's being provincially coordinated. But we will not be opening our schools for the next 2 weeks because we've done that deep cleaning and we don't want to return to that process. And we are following the advice of public health around this. So it is a challenge. But again, I emphasize that, yeah, there's food in those schools, but, you know, that food will all have to be checked before we could distribute it to anybody. And I don't think we have the capacity for that. So, and I just see that Superintendent Puccetti has reiterated what I said. We can't trust the age of the food. So, you know, for us to distribute it would be a challenge. Superintendent Pennyfather, do you want to add anything?
No, just that, in brief, there was caretakers did do some clear out of perishables that were in the fridge right at the beginning of the March break, so that's a good thing. But I would like to reiterate in talking to Graham Hill, who is quarterbacking the whole food security through Food for Life and getting ready to do home deliveries and that kind of thing for our students, is that he says there's a bounty of food out there right now. It's just connecting everybody. So I took that as a good news item, and I hope that continues. He's lots of suppliers and lots of food companies are making offers to them to support our students.
Okay, so we're on to the next question then, and that is from Trustee Amos. Trustee Amos, you might have your mute on. Trustee Amos, I'm sensing you may have technical difficulties. We'll try one more time. Okay, you may want to hang up and redial in and go back on the list. Okay, Trustee Reynolds.
Hi again. So my question through the chair is whether the ministry has given any direction on whether school committees need to meet or connect, and I'm talking about school councils, parent involvement, board committees. Is there any direction on supporting or encouraging or how groups are going to move forward?
Sure, your Chair, comments to Trustee Reynolds. No, there's been in my calls with the ministry, we're now up to 4 of those. There's been no talk of those committee meetings or anything. The focus has been on board meetings at this time. So there's been no discussion around that.
Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Amos, are you back online? You may have to hit *6. Okay, well,
can you hear me?
Oh,
now?
yes. Yes, we can.
Thank you. Yes, I did have to log off and on. Okay, thank you so much. First, I'd like to say how incredibly proud I am of our board and of all staff, the superintendents, director, and everyone, and the trustees, because I think that in this time of uncertainty and probably is equivalent to a world war at another time, that we are all doing our best for the students of Halton, and we're all doing our best we can for just Halton in general. So I just like to say thank you so much to everybody. Now my question is to the director, and I know you probably can't give me a definitive answer, but has the ministry given us an indication of, I know they have said that they potentially are going to make this longer than the 2 weeks after March break, at what point they would have to look at either extending the school year or making some type of an alteration? And part 2 of the question is, are they also talking to universities and colleges so that hopefully students won't lose their years and they will be able to continue on?
Through your Chair, comments to Trustee Trustee Amos. They have given no indication how long that this shutdown will occur, but they have said that they will follow the advice of the Chief Medical Officer of Ontario, Dr. David Williams. So they're working closely with Dr. David Williams, and they will follow the advice of public health around that decision. So although they have not said anything, I think we can maybe surmise or glean from some of the comments from public health where the government may be going, but they have not said anything definitively. As in terms of the school year, it is my understanding at this point, the expectation of the government is that learning will continue in an alternative form, which, and they've called it a continuity of learning, which Associate Director Bogue and his team have been talking about, and therefore the school year would not be in jeopardy. So there's also been no talk about extending the school year, alternate school years, or whatever. And your final question around the colleges and universities and post-secondary opportunities for kids is they have had several conversations with colleges and universities, but I don't know. There's been no. I shouldn't say there's been no discussion, but there's been no discussion with us about the nature of those conversations in terms of acceptance for high school students going next year, or what it means for them going next year. I presume those conversations have been taking place as they have been talking to post-secondary institutions. So there you have it.
Well, thank you. I know you probably couldn't give me a definitive answer, but those are some of the questions I've been getting, so I just wanted to put them out there. So thank you very much.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, since there are no more speakers on the speakers list, I have a couple of questions. One is, I fear for the food that is probably sitting in many lockers across our entire board. I'm sure there's a lot of rotten stuff. And how are we going to deal with that, as well as the fact that there's many personal items that students will have left in their lockers?
Thank you, Chair Gerbents. Through you, Chair Gerbents, I'll just refer that. That's been a topic of conversation for us as well, many, many times, but I'll refer it to Superintendent Puccetti.
So thank you very much to Director Miller and to the Chair. Yes, it is a concern. It's something we are simply going to have to deal with when we make the buildings accessible again to staff. However, we do have, as I said, we have facility supervisors who are touring the buildings every couple of days. And they are dealing with fridges and the milk program. So they're dealing with that now. Most of the lockers are locked, so we wouldn't have access to them, but we're just going to have to monitor it. And when the schools are open, there may be some pretty awful messes to deal with. But I don't know how else we can go around breaking into lockers. Is going to be more of a challenge, I think. So I hope that answers that question.
That'll do. Also, as and this has to do with sort of converting to online or distance learning, and that is, are we providing staff with training? Because I know when I myself went from teaching in a classroom to facilitating an online course, it was very different, and I had a bit of a learning curve for myself. So are we providing training for our staff to be able to do this?
Thank you, Chair Gerbents. Through you, Chair Gerbents, to you, Chair Gerbents, I will refer that to Associate Director Bogue.
And the simple answer, thank you, Director Miller. The simple answer is yes. There are training modules that are already accessible to our staff, but we are working on plans right now, and I think Superintendent Salmini can share some things with you that are already in the works as well. We do recognize that we've got some teachers in our board that may have very little experience still, even in this day and age, really embracing Google Classroom, for example, or some other online platforms. So those pieces will be in place centrally. And we also know there's lots of experience in each of our schools as well. And so I know our principals are already mobilizing the experts in their buildings because they've got relationships there within their buildings. So they've got some coaching already going on within their buildings as well. Thanks.
And only the last thing I have is more of a comment, and that is that I know I've had teachers over the past week or so contacting me. They're very enthusiastic, actually, some of them, about reconnecting with their students and continuation of learning. My caution, of course, is about volume and expectations, because we have many parents that they're now actually supposed to be working at home as well. So there is no way we can expect parents to become instantly or in any way a teacher. We cannot make up for teachers who have been trained in education, so and pedagogy. And so I from a parent's perspective, my hope for what the goal is for this year is to cover the basics and offer enrichment. I don't know if you understand what I mean, but if you've got 3 kids in a house and now you're responsible to be teaching grade 3, grade 5, and grade 7 or something else, and you're supposed to be also managing something from a distance, and you're new to that too, that creates a huge amount of stress in the house. And though that we have parents that are chomping at the bit to have it all for their kids right away, there's also going to be that other segment of parents that are already they're getting close to their limit of being able to cope with what's going on around them. And I think we really need to be cognizant of that whole range that's out there. So I wanted to say that, but I also wanted to applaud all the work that everybody is doing. It is a ton. And also I wanted to mention that we have students in our board right now that are working at those grocery stores. They're working at those takeout and delivery kinds of places. And so we have heroes among us that are our own students. And I want to applaud them and thank them for doing those risky jobs that we've asked them to do with society. So so I guess I'll leave it at that for this part.
Thank you, Chair Burns. That concludes the Director's report. Sad one, but a necessary one given the circumstances. So thank you, trustees, for the questions, and thank you to the senior team for their updates and the answering of all those questions. I'm sure there will be many, many, many more questions in the coming days, and hopefully we start to be able to fill in the gaps of the answers that might be missing at this point. Thanks. I'm done.
And we've had Vice Chair Harrison pop in on the list. She says she can wait to Q&A. Okay, so we'll move forward to communications from the chair. And the only other thing that I wanted to mention is that I was and Director Miller were on a conference call with the Minister of Education last Friday. It seems like so long ago, but it was just last Friday, and the Minister actually took questions from all the chairs of the 72 boards across Ontario. It was very informative. We all are in the same boat together, and all have the same questions. And I just to let the trustees know, I've sent the minister a quick email to thank him for that opportunity and to encourage him to keep up the communication with the trustees. And he did say during the the conference that the governance is very important at this time, and that he wanted to know if it was useful. So I wanted to let him know that it was.
Chair Burns, can I jump in there for a second?
Of course.
On our conference call with the Deputy Minister on Tuesday, she spoke about, Nancy Naylor is the Deputy Minister, she spoke about that conference call on Friday that all the chairs of the boards and the directors were on last Friday, and she had said that the Minister thought it very important and they are working to set up another one. So I thought I would let you know that.
Thank you. That's great information. Otherwise, looking back at our agenda, we have a number of letters that have come in regarding a wide range of topics. So those I'm sure you've already read. On to committee reports. Trustee Oliver submitted a SEAC report that you can read. Are there any other committee reports? I'm assuming the answer is no, but go ahead and put up your hand through the red form if you have. Okay. So now we're going on to trustee questions and comments, and we'll start with Vice Chair Al Harrison.
Hello. Okay, thank you very much. Through you, Madam Chair. Just building on your last comment there, with respect to students who may be working in what have been deemed essential services. I have seen locally here in my son's cohort and him as well, just being called upon more and more to take on additional shifts as things shift and change with the full-time staff. So I just wonder whether that is also being or can be a consideration for those students during these extraordinary times. They may be called on to work near full-time hours out of necessity, which would preclude some of them from doing good work on their school stuff. So I'm not too sure what we should, if we have advice for those families, or if it's outside of our scope at this point in time, but it may become more of a consideration as time goes on. That's thing number one. Thing number two is working with Trustee Amos and Susan Thrasher in the Director's Office to let people know who would have been scheduled to receive their Inspire Awards at the April meeting, that those will be happening face-to-face as soon as we can, so we can celebrate their wonderful contributions for students. And for the nominations that are rolling in, we're also saying a similar message that we will be looking at those as soon as we possibly can, but that there will likely be a delay. And that's all. Thank you.
Through the Chair, did you want me to comment on those, Vice Chair Al Harrison, or did you just want to leave them out there because we've heard them? So.
I would say go ahead.
Who, me?
Sure.
On your first point, I would say this, Vice Chair Harrison, certainly we have always accommodated students who have challenging work situations and or are elite athletes or elite into the arts. So we would continue to accommodate best we could. One of the challenges will be the integrity of credit courses going forward, as we have to prepare kids for post-secondary if they are in their final years. But certainly our principals are very accommodating and flexible at figuring those things out. And if they're aware of it, I have every confidence that they would be able to help support a student that found themselves having to work more hours than they had expected given the circumstances. So it's important that parents do let principals know if that's the case, and or the kids. I mean, they're high school students, so quite often they are the ones who want to let the principal know. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments for the, any other questions or comments from trustees? Okay, well, just a reminder that we will be having a meeting next week. Please look, it will probably be, since we have nothing that's listed as an action item for next week, at this point in this particular agenda, there probably won't be a lot to the agenda next week, especially with regards to voting on items. But I feel, and I'm sure many people feel, that this being able to have updates from the staff with regards to how things are moving forward